Hi team, welcome to my session on Coffee with Prab, and today we're going to discuss about CISA Domain 1, your last minute Coffee with Prab. This video is different from others because in this video I'm covering the high level pointers that you should know when you are preparing for the CISA, and it is the first kind of a video which cover the holistic view of the entire Domain 1 of CISA. My name is Prab, and for more information you can check my LinkedIn profile, and if you're new to the channel, do subscribe to my YouTube channel and click on the bell icon to make sure you should not miss my future videos on a similar topic. So without wasting a time, let's start with the first part. Thank you. So domain 1 represent 18% of CISA exam. It means you can say that 27 questions you can expect from the domain 1. And when you say about 18% of the entire content will be testable in the exam from this domain, well, it means 27 questions. It is not necessary there will be direct questions. Okay, so question can start from domain 5, answer is from domain 1. Okay, question can be start with network security audit. You're preparing the audit parameter and all that. What is the first document? We need an audit charter. So audit charter is a topic covered in the domain 1. So that's why it is difficult to differentiate. Is it question is really from domain 1 or it is a question from domain 5? Because sometimes questions start from domain 1, answer is from domain 5. Question basically talk about the domain 1, options are talking about domain 5, vice versa. But as I said, when they say the question start from domain 5, answer is from domain 1, it means they're testing the knowledge of domain 1. And it is a humble request to everyone who preparing for CISA, please give proper attention to domain 1, because domain 1 is the foundation, because it talk about audit. That's why domain 1 is split into two parts, planning and execution. Planning has a ISAudit standard guideline function code of ethics, type of audit, assessment review, very important. Risk-based auditing confirm, type of control confirm in the exam. So you should know these things. On the other side, part B, when you document execution, audit project management is very important. Audit testing sampling methodology, you can't skip. Confirm, very important. Audit evidence collection techniques can be asked. It's very important. You should know the perspective and all that. I'm going to cover all this pointer in detail. Okay, audit data analytics, part of a new syllabus of CISA, because last year CISA has revised the syllabus and they added a very good section of AI/ML with audit data analytics. It was there before, but this time they added a AI/ML in that. And the reporting and communication techniques and quality assurance improvement program is a part of this requirement. So the first part we're going to discuss about the planning. So in my next slide, we're going to first cover the planning and then we cover the execution. Okay, so we are starting with the domain 1, and in domain 1, the first topic is information system. But when you're talking about information system, why we are starting with information system? Because if you even can see the full form of CISA, Certified Information System Auditor. By end of the day, the certification basically help you to understand how to audit information system. Now, what is information system? See, information system is a combination of people. Oh, let me use a black marker. Okay, so people, process, and technology. People, process, and technology. Okay, so let's say example. This is one online platform we have. You're using this online platform for meetings and all that. This online platform used by the user. So user basically using this online platform, and through that he can able to connect with his customer. So it's an app, but this app is hosted on any server or technology and all that. And that technology and server managed by the people. So if they want to introduce any kind of a changes in the technology, the people will follow the process by which they change the technology, right? Like I want you to in a comment, tell me in comment box, like if you want to introduce any kind of a changes in the change management techniques and all that, we follow change management process. If any incident happen, we will follow incident management process. So same thing here, people will follow the process and by which they manage the technology. So this certification teach you how to audit people, how to audit process, and how to audit technology. Always remember one thing, from audit perspective, CISA perspective, always remember people safety will be the first choice. Before auditing a technology, first we validate whether process is there or not. and then we audit the technology. So information system is all about people, process and technology which work together to create a value for the stakeholders like us who are using this meeting and all that. That's why information system is a structure set up comprising of people, process, technology and data that work together to collect, process, store and distribute the information. And all these are working together to support the decision making, coordinations and all that. Now question is, why are we mentioning here combination of strategic, managerial, and operational activity? Let me explain you why. See, when we're talking about any organization, okay, every organization basically have a 3 vertical. So first is every organization has a vision, why they exist, and then they have a mission, a path on which they work. Then we create a strategy, a long-term plan. Then we have a tactical plan. And then we have an operational plan. Let's take example, you're working for the bank. The bank has decided that they want to increase a customer. They want to increase a business. They want expansion. So far they're doing an offline business. So strategy is always created by senior management or board. And their objective was to do the expansion. So here we have a CIO. Here we have a CISO who basically working on the tactical side to see how can we support the strategy. Okay, bank has decided they want to make it digital. They want everything to be online. To support the online, we need technology like online, right? So they will create a tactical plan. And then we have an operation team who will implement that plan. So by end of the day, all are working together to create a value. So that's why I say information system are the combination of strategic, managerial, operation activities, which includes under which hardware, software, data, people, process, and by this, which creating a value. Okay, so that's something is most important part. So when I'm talking about audit, so information system here, whenever in the CISA, when you're preparing IS audit is not information security audit, it is a information system audit, remember. So information system, the scope of IS audit is the information system, which encompasses both IT infrastructure and business process. Now, what is the role of an auditor? What is your role? So your role is like analyze the interaction between the IT system and business process to evaluate all the risk and control that we're going to discuss in the further slide. Let's say example, the auditor here evaluating ERP system, but he can able to evaluate ERP systems to check whether they are automated effectively. Do they have a secure procurement process? Do they have appropriate control? Because from the exam point of view, you should know the difference between the information system and IT. So information system include the IT, but focus on the process and interaction. So that something is the first thing you need to understand. So now the question is basically, what is the role of an audit? Why we conducting an audit? As I said, audit is providing the effectiveness. So every company build one division, which is called as an internal audit division, which is also called as a third line of defense. And their responsibility is to audit all the business, all the technology, and give the independent viewpoint, independent viewpoint to the stakeholder. So let's say example, if I invested 1 CR in any company, as a stakeholder, as an investor, I should know what they're doing with that money, right? Are they working as per the requirement? So when we're talking about auditor follow all these guidelines, do the independent audit and provide the independent viewpoint to the stakeholders. That's why internal audit department directly reports to the board of director. But I'm not telling you, okay, CISA will only teach you about internal audit. No, we have after doing the CISA certifications and all that, you can work in a different division. Like we have a division called assurance team where you can work as an auditor. We have an internal audit team where you can work as an internal auditor and all that. But by end of the day, CISA will teach you what is audit and how to do the audit on high level. Okay, because it's a vendor neutral certification. It doesn't talk about particular standards. Okay, so here the question is, what is the purpose of audit? Why we do audit? We're doing an audit of we're doing a information system audit because sometimes we need to comply with legal, regulatory, contract. Okay, always remember one thing, if you get any question in the exam document, what is the primary parameter we need to consider is comply with business, and which include your law, legal, regulatory, because when it comes to the question on must, then law and regulation cannot be skipped. Okay, so the purpose of information audit is to ensure compliance with law, regulation, contracts, industry standards. We also need to verify the governance criteria, and we need to ensure the controls are in place. Let's say example, someone has committed, they're following an incident management process. An incident management process itself is a control. Okay, So we need to abide, we need to validate whether they're following effectively. Are they closing the incident in 2 days? Do they follow they follow the follow process? So these processes are the controls. So we need to verify. Third is we need to maintain the CIA confidentiality, integrity, availability of systems, and how we do that by checking the appropriate controls. Are we taking backup on time? Are we encrypting the data? Do we have adequate available resources to provide the availability? And we also assess the operational efficiency and effectiveness of the IT process. So the primary purpose, if you get a question, answer is this. And if the question specifically talking about from security point of view, maintain the CIA is the ultimate goal in the audit. Now, second part is how to conduct audit. You can expect some questions around the audit planning process. So overall entire audit activity is split into 3 parts. One is called planning, second is called fieldwork, documentation, and third is called report and follow-up. See, if you don't have experience on the internal audit side, okay, and you really want to understand a hand-to-hand one example, there is a one dedicated video I made on YouTube. Just type internal audit prep. The first video is that only, in which I explain hand-to-hand case study how to conduct internal audit. Now here coming back, so when you're talking about audit process, the first step is planning. Now in the planning, we have 3 things: define the objectives, scope, and resource allocation. Let's say example, company has involved me in conducting an audit for data center. So objective is to conduct the data center audit. The scope of the data center is India, and we have 2 auditors allocate for that. So everything will be done in the planning stage. Then we need to execute the audit. So second step is called as a fieldwork documentation, where we schedule the meeting. We basically have a meeting with the auditees, understand the requirement, understand how they're doing there, and then we validate. And then we prepare the report. Now, one thing always remember, we cannot directly present the report to the customers. We need to first take the auditee confirmations on the report, whether findings are okay or not, and then we provide the actual report to the stakeholders, because auditee here responsible for implementing the action plan. I have given them recommendation, so they have to give me the action plan on that. That's why auditee consent is very important. So this is the auditing process we have that we need to follow. Again, I'm telling you, there's a dedicated internal audit video is there. If you can go through that, I have explained these 3 phases more practical manner in more than 50 minutes. The third is that when you're talking about scope of IS audit, it covers IT systems, related business process, it evaluate the internal controls, identify the weakness, and recommend the improvement. That is part of the function. So because we just discussed, right, information system is all about people, process, and technology. So we auditing, when you're talking about scope here, the scope cover all 3 functions. Now question is, when you're doing CISA certification, when you see this exam, what is your role in the exam from auditor perspective? Because you have to think like an auditor. Your role throughout the journey of the CISA exam is not to implement, not to configure. Your role is to assess and notify. That's it. So my every slide has this pointer. What is the role of an auditor in the IS audit? So as an auditor, he ensures the audits are, aligned with the organization goals. Regulatory compliance by using some structure and evidence-based approach. One thing is that you cannot simply say anything to anyone until unless you don't have evidence. Okay, so you said, okay, these guys are not closing an incident management ticket in 2 days. They are not following the separation of a duty. One person is approving the bill. Do you have any evidence? If you don't have any evidence, you cannot able to prove. So make sure a good audit is the one which aligns with the organization goal. Okay, the scope of the audit was India data center. Evidence we got of the India data center. Process of auditing we doing for India data center. So make sure your audit is well aligned with the scope and organization goal. Example here is auditor assess whether financial organization systems comply with PCI DSS for securing the payment transaction system. So here you can see 3 things. 1, auditor is doing an audit of financial organization system. Compliance requirement is PCI. Ultimate goal is to secure the payment transaction. So remember that. So from the exam point of view, remember that you need to know 3 phases. What is planning, what is fieldwork, and what is reporting? Because question may ask for the correct sequence or focus on each phase, and that for sure. So next part is called as a IS audit standards, guidelines, and function. See, before I want to jump into the IS audit standard guideline function, I want to discuss a brief overview about how the audit things works in the organization. See, we have a 2 way to check the audit. Okay, one, I'm using some certification, and based on that I'm conducting an audit. So in that case, you can take an example of ISO 27001, the best example. Okay, so if you take an example of ISO 27001, My audit will be around this standard only. Okay, I'm doing an audit of 20,000. I'm doing an audit of PCI DSS. I'm doing audit based on a SOC 2. So my controls, my requirement will be around this standard. But when internal audit does the audit, they don't do the audit based on any standard. They do the audit what they have agreed with the stakeholders. So example, like if they agree with the stakeholder, change management will be closed in 2 days. We validate the process where process says change request to be closed in 2 days. So we ask for the evidence, we check the log, is the change is closed in 2 days, simple. So here what happen is, one is you following some standards through which you conducting an audit. But sometimes what happen, we have some vendor neutral framework. So ISACA has their own standard of conducting an audit. Okay, so ITAF, we have ITF. So ISACA has their own standards. We talk about, okay, this is the mandatory requirement you need to follow while conducting any audit. You know, example, like we have a rule book, right? See, 27001 talk about these controls need to be audited. These are the mandatory controls. But here, ISACA standard talk about this is how you should do audit. This is your rule book. Okay, so standard is mean uniformity. Don't go by standard called certification. Standard is the English word. It means what is uniform across the organization. I will give an example of that. Okay. Hey guys, everyone should be on the dinner table, or we have a policy that, okay, everyone should have a dinner on time. What is the time? You're getting a point. So time here is uniform. So 8 o'clock we decided we will have a dinner together. So that is the standard. So same like every system should be protected with a password. So that's a policy. Okay. Standard is 8 character to be followed. So it will be uniform. So standard is an English word. I'm not going by certification. So ISACA has their own standard, which auditor can use to conduct an audit. But that standard is not having a control. They talk about, that standard is talk about how to conduct an audit. Okay. It's a reference guideline. So there will be 1 or 2 questions on their own standard, directly, indirectly. But so you should know there is a framework we have, there is a standard we have, or ISACA, which can be used as an auditor for conducting an audit as a reference point. So ISACA standard is defined the mandatory requirement for IS auditing. And the benefit of using those standards is ensure the consistent and professional conduct. Because if you and me in the same company, now I'm in the company from last 10 years. And if I'm not following any standard of conducting an audit and all that, and if tomorrow I leave, so it is difficult for you to conduct the audit. So by following a standard, it is easy for me to do the KT, knowledge transfer. So we have a standard, we have a guideline. Guideline provide the implementation advice and flexibility of the scenario. And then we set up the audit functions, which enhance the IT governance, compliance with strategic objective. That's why in every company, we have an internal audit, third line of defense. And they identify the risk and assess the control effectiveness. There's a dedicated video I made on GRC. Okay, I think it's a 2 hour 30 minutes video in which I have explained all these internal audit functions and all that. So you can check that. Okay, I will share in the description box. And then when you're talking about the component of IS audit, it includes the strategic and operation evaluation IT systems. And we also review the hardware, software, communication tools and output mechanism. So that something is a part of a component. Now question is, what is the role of an auditor? So auditor can use the defined standards to ensure audits are adhered to the globally accepted professional practice. Okay. And remember for the exam, you should be very clear with the difference between standard and guideline. So standard is mandatory, guideline is flexible. So that's something you need to have. Okay. So as a standard, like password must be 8 characters. So do not use family name, do not use, spouse name and all. That's a guideline. Same like you must provide the report on a timely basis. That's a standard with a particular format. Okay. Always use English, prefer English, avoid grammatical mistakes. That's a guideline. So that's how you need to mention. So one thing is that I have seen a lot of people struggle on this area. ISACA has their own ethics. They have their own ethic rules. When you become a member of ISACA, you should abide with the rules. And, when you're going for the certification, there will be 1 or 2 questions on their ethics, how you should be. So example, like when you become a doctor, you have to take one oath. Same like when you become a member of ISACA, ISACA has their own rules. You have to follow that. So one of the core principles is maintain the confidentiality, integrity. Example, you're doing an audit of one organization. You cannot share those reports with other customers. And there is a question like that might be there. So that question will test your knowledge on the professional ethics. So, avoid conflict of interest. You cannot work for the 2 projects simultaneously. You belong to same business, protect the stakeholder interest, ensure the ethical conducts. Okay. Ensure independence in the audit. You should not present any kind of a report under any pressure and all that. Okay. Like I'm doing an audit of a manager. So, I have to save my job. So make sure you should be independent in your audit. That is why we say internal audit in the organization. They are working independently. They directly report to the board. They don't report to anyone in the company. And always best practice is that when you're providing any report, it should be accurate and it should be unbiased, because based on your report only the company take a decisions. So role of an auditor here is uphold the highest ethical standard while ensure auditing the sensitive or critical system. CISA decline, let's say example, CISA decline engagement where the objective might be compromised due to the personal relationship. So remember that you can expect some scenario based questions on maintaining a independence and confidentiality during an audit. That's something you need to remember from the exam point of view. So this is the continuation of my previous slide. So when we're talking about standard, like what kind of ISACA standard they have a standards which apply to ethics, independence, objectivity, DUK, and all. No, let's say example, I join one company. Before that, there is no audit function. Now, what is audit function? What is the things happen in the audit function? So I can refer ISACA standard. They have all these functions. Okay, you must have this, you must have that. You can create your own rule book from their reference guide. So they have a professional standard, like, deal with how audits are conducted, including, what is a planning supervision, how to score, what is a risk materiality assessment, how to allocate the resource, how to maintain the evidence. And when you're preparing a report, they also talk about reporting standard, like type of reports, short term, long term, how to communicate the findings, what kind of information need to provide to stakeholder, what is the customer requirement. So that's why the standard are mandatory for IS auditor, and they ensure, they ensure the uniformity and professionalism in the audit process. That's something, need to be remembered. And one more important thing you need to understand here is when you're talking about the report here, when you're talking about report, one important thing is that when you're preparing a report, that should be comply with the reporting standard for clarity and effective communication. Is it clear? So that something is part of a requirement. Okay, so as I said, standard are the mandatory define what must be done during an audit. So ISACA has some standard, but as I said, they will not directly ask you anything from ISACA standard. Indirect question will be there, what is the biggest concern for auditor when he presenting a report? If the report is his first senior, so it should be independence missing and all, so that's there. So I've seen a lot of people get confused with standard, guideline, ethics. So standard talk about what need to be done. Okay, guideline talk about how. Ethics govern how you behave. Ethics is always related to the individual. Standard and guideline is more related to the enterprise. So what is the role of auditor? So role of auditor is integrate the standard, guideline, ethics into the audit practice. Like while evaluating the financial system, CISA use standard to define scope, guideline, plan, testing procedure. So here what happens is testing and all that, following the ISACA standard, ITF. And remember the exam that you need to know the difference between the standard and guideline ethics, and question often tests their application in the scenarios. That something is part of the function. So, I will explain you before I move to internal audit functions and all that. Let me first explain you again the 3 line of defense, how the business works. So this is your business. We have a 3 line here. The first line we called as the second line, and then we have a third line. In first line, we have let's say example, we have a operation team like employee managers. They are the one who are responsible for day-to-day risk management, implementing controls and all that. Second line of defense is called as a risk management team and compliance team. When you do your C risk, ISO 31000 and all that, you're working on the second line of defense. They oversight, guidance, monitoring to ensure risk are being managed effectively and all that. Then we have an internal audit, which is third line of defense. They are the one who audit the first and second line and provide the independent viewpoint to the board. What is happening? That's why they don't take that the domain cannot report to anyone. So in layman term, first line, the sales team follow the company data protection policy. The second line, compliance team monitor if the policy has been followed. And the third line, which is called internal audit, evaluate both the sales team and compliance team for their effectiveness and provide the independent viewpoint to the board. Now, why I'm talking about this? Because now we're talking about how to build internal information system internal audit functions. So information system internal function provide the IT related control assurance within a financial and operational context, because the financial systems also running the IT and many functions as independent group or as a part of a broad internal audit team. Now, when you building an internal audit team, okay, you cannot go and tell everyone, hey, we are an internal audit team. No, it's not like that. The first thing what you build is called as an audit charter, and this is very, very important for the exam. You should know what is audit charter and when to use audit charter. Now, what is audit charter? So audit charter document the management responsibilities and objective of IS audit function. We as a management decided to build internal audit. We are the internal audit team. We does this, we did that. Because see, every time you cannot go and give the interview who you are. So this is something we publish on our intranet portal, which give the visibility about we have a one domain which is called internal audit. Now question can be asked in the exam, what is included in the audit charter? Scope, authority, accountability, and make sure it is approved by the highest level of management or group audit committees. And any kind of a changes charter, it required through justification, and default it need to be reviewed annually. So audit charter reflect the management responsibility, reflect the auditor responsibility, reflect the audit, why the audit team exists in the organization. The first thing that a document we build when you're building an internal audit function or information system and audit function is audit charter. Okay, audit charter. It's very important for you to understand. And the key responsibility is to maintain the independence, competence while fulfilling the objectives. And we need to ensure the IS audit function add value to the organization efficiencies and business goal. One more important thing I need to explain you here is there is one more concept we called as an engagement letter. Engagement letter. See, the difference between the audit charter and engagement letter is audit charter is a document approved by those charged with governance that define the purpose, authority, responsibility of internal audit. We creating this one document which reflect what is the purpose of audit team. But engagement letter we create for every audit. Example, when we start any audit, the first thing we send the engagement letter. So engagement letter is a formal document which defines the IS audit responsibility, authority, accountability for a specific assignment. Remember that, for a specific assignment. Okay, so remember one thing, audit charter, one document which reflect all the audit responsibilities and all that, and engagement letter created for the external audit or any particular audit we create. The first document we send the engagement letter only. Okay, it more focus on the particular audit activities. And when we're talking about any audit functions and all that, it's very important how do you see the audit. Okay, so that something is very important. Okay, so before I jump into things, so as I said, we discussed, remember, we have audit process activity. This is what we're talking about. The first step is planning, where we determine the subject, what we need to audit. Like my audit is specific locations and all that. And we define the audit objective. We're doing an audit for internal audit certifications and all that. We set the audit scope. We're doing audit specific to the India region. We collect basic data. We do the meeting, which is called a pre-audit planning, and then we determine the procedure. Then we move in the ground level. We acquire the data first. Always remember one thing, when we conduct any audit, first we collect all the documents and everything, learn that. You cannot simply go with an empty mind. You acquire the data, you acquire the report, you review the report, then you schedule the meeting and ask, okay, as per the procedure, you said the change is closed in 2 days. Is it true? He said yes. Then we test those changes. Is it closed? So we ask for the logs. Then we discover the validation. We document the results. Then we gather the report requirement. We draft the report, get the conformity from the auditee, and then we issue the report. And we also responsible for doing a follow-up. Okay, so we are also responsible for doing a follow-up, because make sure they have closed this audit. Make sure they have closed this findings. For that, we need to do the audit. That something is part of the function. So as I said, internal audit function. Now question is what kind of a resource we need in the information system audit. So IS auditor must have a technical skills and knowledge. That is something is very important part here. So that they can because we're talking about information system audit. If they don't have a knowledge of IT and information, they cannot able to conduct the audit. And on regular basis, they need to go through the trainings and professional development, because today we have a AI ML. So until unless I don't know what is AI, what is ML, what is black box and all that, I can't able to do the audit of AI ML systems. So make sure we should have annual training plans for the auditors, so they can able to upgrade the skills by which they can able to perform the duties. And we need to make sure the planning should be aligned with the audit priorities. Okay, now let's say example, this year we have 7 critical audits. And now we have only limited auditors. So based on limited auditors, we can also shortlist. Okay, out of 7, how many are very, very critical? So we can do that. So when we having a running out of shortage of resources and all that, we can able to prioritize the audit prior activities and all that based on a resource, based on a skill set. Now question is, what is the role of an auditor here? Or role of a CISA candidate? We need to ensure that, okay, information system, internal audit function to be operated independently, and make sure you should have a regular review and update the audit charter to reflect the organization need and audit the priorities. So like CISA will draft an audit charter, outline the authority, review the cybersecurity policy, approve the pen testing, and remember from the exam point of view is audit charter grant authority and define the IS audit function scope. And question may focus on its purpose, approval process, necessary updates and all that. So it's very important that you should know. Now, when you're working in the IS audit functions, another important thing you need to remember is independence and competence. So as an IS audit function, you must operate independently. Auditor should report findings to the board. This is the exam question. It can be exam question, so you should know this. And as an IS auditor function, you should be enhanced with the IT governance. Now, what is IT governance? See, when you're talking governance, governance is a set of operation. Like we have a parenting governance in the house, right? Parenting governance is what? So parents creating a rules, parents creating a time schedule for our kids. Same like organization have a senior management board, they create a rules, they create a policy by which we manage the operations. So we have a first called corporate governance, which is created by the board. Then it is backed and supported by the IT governance, which is created by a CIO. And then we have a information security governance and we have a audit governance. I'm just giving an example here. So governance is a set of operation. So as an IS audit function, we have, the core role is to enhance the IT governance, because by doing an IT, they can able to improve the IT. And ultimately by improving IT, they're supporting a business objective. Any audit they're doing, which is, so now let's say example, you might get a question is you have 7 audits for this year. How do you prioritize? You will see which audit is aligned with the business objective. Okay, I have to audit this system this year because we are having some major transformation for a business next year for this. So that's why we have to audit this. So you can prioritize based on a business objective. So, you're getting a point. So that's how it need to be prioritized. Another important thing as an IS auditor, you need to maintain the professional skills, certification, training, continuous learnings. And that is why, CISA certification is valid for 3 years, in which you need to maintain 120 CP points. You need to demonstrate your experience. You need to demonstrate that, okay, after clearing a certification, you're updating your knowledge, you're upgrading your knowledge. That something is part of a requirement. So what is the role of an auditor? The question is that. So we manage the IS audit function effectively to ensure auditors remain independent, compliant. Example like CISA auditor oversee training for auditors on emerging risk like cloud security, AI, ML, remote work environment. And remember from the exam is question may test the independence of the IS audit function and how value added contribution enhance the organization efficiency. The ultimate goal is that by introducing an IT audit, we are improving the IT governance, addressing, now question is how we enhancing the IT governance by 3 ways: creating a value for the stakeholder, reducing a risk, and increase the performance. I repeat again, create a value, reduce the risk, increase the performance. So by doing an audit, we're creating a value. By doing an audit, we're reducing a risk. By creating a value, we're creating a performance and all that. And by this, we can able to achieve the business objectives. Ultimately, but sometimes what happen is we might using external auditors. So we might need to use external auditors sometime, because when we're having some specialized audit, like now we are in 2025, we have some AI ML. So my auditor is not up to date on what is AI, what is ML. So in that case, I will involve the external audit. And this is what you need to know from exam point of view. In which condition we involve the external audit? Scarcity of information system audit of a specialized area like forensic, cybersecurity. And in 2025, we're talking about AI ML. Because expert may be required for industry specific audit like banking, privacy. Now we have in India DPDP, the Saudi has a PDPL. So we have a new regulations are coming. We have AI Act is coming. So for this, we need an experts who can do the audit in this area. So in that case, we need to onboard the external auditors. So what is the responsibility of the IS auditor, what we onboard? So first is independence. As I said, ensure no conflict of interest in outsourced services. Like, okay, I will not give a project to my favorite vendor. Okay, clear objectives, make sure communicate the audit scope, methodology, expectation, and review work. Confirm all the reports and findings from the external experts meet the audit objectives and standard. So sometime what happened, we have some consideration So here I'm talking about when I'm onboarding any audit firm or auditor. Okay. So we have to make sure we have to restrict on outsourcing based on law regulation. We have to see any impact we have on the overall scope and independence. And we also need to check the qualification of an auditor. We cannot simply give audit project to someone. So we need to evaluate manager relationship as an external expert while maintaining overall responsibility of audit outcome. And let's say example, CISA will review or auditor will review the reports from a third party expert hired to conduct the pen test to ensure the findings are aligned with the audit scope. Remember from the exam, outsource does not transfer responsibility. Auditors still remain accountable for audit outcome, and question may test how to manage the outsource audits. So that's something you need to know from the exam perspective. So next part is called as a type of audits, assessment, review. Before I jump into what is the type of audits we have according to CISA, let me first explain you what is audit, what is assessment, and what is review. Now, when we're talking audit is like a formal independent examination of any organization system. Okay, like I'm doing an independent audit. And if we have a multiple reason for examining any system, example like I'm examining system because someone has told me to do that. I'm examining the policy because someone has told me to do that. So auditing itself is a word called independent examination. Okay, so that is called audit. So one more example is conducting IT security audit to check the compliance for 27001 in depth and very important. Second is called as a assessment. Now assessment is a semi-formal. Actually audit is highly formal. Okay, assessment is a semi-formal. They identify the risk and improvements. They talk about the insights. They talk about the recommendations. Like they are broader and less formal than audit, but may focus on specific area like risk assessment we're doing, assessment reports. Okay, so that's an example of assessment, and the purpose of assessment is to strengthen or weakness or risk to be identified. The third is called review. So assessment and audit both include one important thing, which is called review. Review is informal validations. We look for feedbacks, reviewing the project reports. So review is like a less formal examination, typically focus on a specific aspect to confirm its appropriateness, progress, and performance. Let me give an example. I'm doing an audit of change management where I'm assessing the change management process, is the documents are appropriate or not. And then during that I'm reviewing all the artifacts and everything. Is it clear? So audit focus on compliance with some benchmark. Assessment focus on identifying risk and improvement area, and review talk about the validations and approval. So that something is basically very important to understand. Now here in the CISA, we're talking about audits. Okay, so IT audit ensure the data security, integrity, availability. We validate the CIA and make sure we have a proper controls to comply with the business objectives and all that. And each control should be aligned with organization goal. Remember, that is the purpose of doing an IT audit. Now we have a compliance audit. Compliance audit, basically we do the audit based on some regulations and all that, like GDPR is there, HIPAA is there. Based on that, we're doing an audit. We'll not go beyond that. Third is called financial audit, where we're auditing the accuracy of financial reporting compliance when the company go public listing and all that. Or as an investor, I want to know where my money gone, what is the profit, what are the things. So I used to receive this PL reports, right? Profit loss reports and all that. Is it accurate? So we do the audit based on that. Then we have audit of the general process like change management process, administration process, provisioning process. So that is come under the operational audits, which assess the effectiveness and efficiency of any process. Then sometimes we have a specialized audits like fraud audits. Okay, we detect the irregularity. We have a forensics audit, which support the legal investigation. We have a readiness assessment where we evaluate the preparedness before the formal audit. So these are something part of the thing. So what is the role of an auditor here? So when we're talking about report or when we're talking about any audit plan, it should be tailored as per the approach. Always remember one thing. So when you're conducting an audit, it will be based on the scope. Okay. And example like conducting a readiness assessment for PCRS's compliance before undergoing third-party certification audit. And remember for the exam is be prepared to identify which audit type apply to the given scenario. That something is there. And we plan the audit as per the requirement. Now, another important thing we need to understand CSA. Very, very important. Very important. Do not skip that. CSA, control self-assessment. It involves the process owner evaluating controls and risk for the area. I will give a very, very basic example of what is CSA. See, when you go for your annual increment, So before going for the increment, you basically fill one form, which is called as a annual performance form. Okay, we also call it as a self-assessment form. And based on that form, we evaluate and we give the increments and all that. So before facing any audit by any auditor, the people do the audit of themselves. So example, like company introduces the policies, company introduces some procedures. So people need to understand, are they aware about the policies? Are they aware about the procedures? So we do the questionnaires, we do the assessment, so that, it should not be any surprise if any external auditor come and ask for some policy document. Instead of getting some surprise, we conduct this kind of an assessment, control self-assessment, where we drive the questionnaires and all that, and we'll check, how much people are aware about this. I'll give an example of that. Okay. So there's a large bank and they're implementing a CSA process to evaluate its operational controls and compliance with anti-money laundering regulation, AML regulation. Okay. So there's a bank is there. Okay. So there is a bank. Okay. And they want to comply with AML, anti-money laundering regulation. So what is the step they will take for CSA? As I said, see, I am an auditor. Doing an audit is one thing. Employer will ask, we will share some questionnaires and we'll see the response. What is the response? The employer will refer on that. And by that, we getting visibility, how much they know about the policy. So before auditor will ask the question, by seeing this question, they get the visibility where they stand, right? So we conduct on a regular basis this kind of an assessment. So here we have one role which is called as a facilitator. So there's called as a CSA facilitator, is a compliance officer with expertise in the AML regulation. And the key stakeholders include the branch manager, compliance officer, and IT support staff. An objective is to evaluate the effectiveness of existing controls and also identifying and reporting the suspicious financial transactions. So here in CSA, what we do workshop. So facilitator will conduct the workshop with stakeholder to identify a gap in email process, and participant will fill out the survey to self-assess the effectiveness of existing control, like such as transaction monitoring system, staff training program, and all that. Then we review the control objectives. So are the suspicious transaction flag on time? Is the employee aware of AML policies? How to file the suspicious activity reports? Then lack of consistency in the suspicious activity report filling across the branches is identified. So we review the result is 85% of the branch manager report that transaction monitoring systems are effective. 15 has highlighted, or 16%, 20% have highlighted there's a delay due to the outdated softwares. So recommendation is upgrading a monitoring. So it's not an audit, So we asking some questions, we getting a visibility, right? So the benefit of CSA is to early detection of risk. Okay, increase the ownership of control by the process owner. Okay, now we are participating in the survey, we're giving a responses. So we should be more mentally prepared for that. And it enhances the communication things. Disadvantage is that it's not a replacement for information system audit, because some people believe like by asking us question, it's like audit only. And limited effectiveness in participation, lack of knowledge or motivation. Let's say example, some self-assessment questionnaires are there, and they also sharing their viewpoint. And if we don't take that viewpoint seriously and we just ignore that feedback, then the motivation go down. So by having a control self-assessment, we are able to identify a gap where we stand and what my employee is aware about that. Now question is, what is the role of an auditor? So role of an auditor is he will facilitate and conduct the workshop and check whether CSA practice has been followed properly or not. Let's say example, CSA workshop for HR team to evaluate the effectiveness of access control in the employee management systems. So remember, question may focus on the role of CSA in a risk detection. So answer is early detection of the risk and the limitations compared to the full audit. So we have one more audit, which is called as an integrated audit. Integrated audit means we combining all the audits, combining the multiple discipline like financial, operational, IS audit for a comprehensive review. And the objective is to focus on identifying risk across the process and system. If you take an example, the annual financial audit is a combination of integrated, in which the financial report get audited, technology get audited, and process get audited. That's a perfect example. So benefit, if you get a question, what is the primary benefit of conducting an integrated audit? Holistic view of organization risk. Because if you're doing a one process audit and we find nothing, might be that process is very closely aligned with the other critical process. You getting a point? So that is why by doing the integrated audit, you will get a holistic view of the organization risk. Second is we can able to enhance the collaboration between the different audit team. That's there. And the steps that we take for integrators: identify the key area and key controls, risk area and key controls. We test the IT system support for this control, and we provide the combined report on the control design effectiveness. So if we take example, we have a financial report. This financial report generated through this IT system. This IT system hosting a technology. So doing an audit of this, then we're doing an audit. So this is how. So we know that, okay, this is very important because this report is generated from this. This is very important because this is hosted here. So we identify the key risk areas and key controls. We test IT system support for this control and provide the combined report on the control design effectiveness. So question is now, what is the role of an auditor from a CISA exam? Coordinate with the financial operation auditor to assess the IT related risk holistically. Conducting an integrated audit for ERP system to evaluate financial reporting accuracy and IT security control. So today, if we talk about SOX and all that, we follow that. So remember from the exam, integrated audit demands collaboration between the discipline, and you can expect some questions on the combining findings into the signal report. That's a very important part. Now, in the audit, we have some issues, and that issues is called as an audit risk. Before I discuss about audit risk, let me first explain you what is risk. Risk is like a probability of something go down, a probability of something in a negative manner. So that is called as a risk. Like, probability of this occur, and then there will be the impact. So let's say example, you are not very good with domain 1. You weak in domain 1. That is called as a vulnerability. Vulnerability is called as a weakness. You are weak in the domain 1. That's a weakness. That's called vulnerability. And the threat is if they ask question from that area. So you have to understand one thing. You can only control vulnerability, not threat. You cannot control what will be the first question. So that is a threat. But the question is, what is the chance of this question will become to test your this weak area? So that is called likelihood. How sure we are that, okay, this is going to be asked, and what is the level of damage they can do. So likelihood is high, definitely there. And if you don't unable to answer, impact is high. So overall for you, the loss is approx $740 or $760. That is the cost of the exam. So here you might lose $760. You're getting a point. So risk is always calculated by likelihood and impact. So when I'm doing any audit, okay, during an audit also we face some risk. So first is called inherent risk. Inherent is risk without control. It means I'm moving data in the cloud. Oh, you don't have any visibility. That's a default inherent risk. So we apply encryptions. We have a contract to try to reduce. Then one risk is missing here risk, which is called as a residual risk. Now remember one thing, risk before implementing control is inherent. The risk which is left after implementing control, the risk is left is residual risk. Example, company has decided they want to move to cloud. We already created this assumption. We have a very limited visibility on the cloud. Data leaving the organization control, moving to the cloud. So there's a lot of inherent risk is there. Then we decided to implement the encryption, contract and all that. And after that, some portion of data still there, and still data is there on the cloud. So that is a risk we have accepted. That is called as a residual risk. Concern comes here is when you implement the control is not working effectively. That's called control risk. Example, you appoint the security guard, but he was sleeping. You implement the encryption, which can be exploited. That's called control risk. And last is called as a detection risk. Detection risk is when during an audit, the audit does not discover the risk. That is called as a detection risk. And overall, that lead to the audit risk, which provide the wrong opinion. So determining the importance of finding based on a potential impact on business decisions. So that's very important to have a evidence materiality. So what is the role of a CISA and auditor is to ensure audit findings are material to the organization goals and communicate the risk clearly. Example, highlight the weak access control could lead to significant financial loss if exploited. And remember from the exam point of view is that be clear on how the audit risk components are interact. Like overall audit risk equal to inherent risk, multiply by control risk, multiply by detection risk. So here, that's a very important part, okay? So that's how we say, if you see definition, audit risk, you can say is the risk that auditor issue an incorrect opinion on the financial statement Audit risk can be defined as a risk that information may contain material error that may go undetected during an audit because of the detection risk. An audit risk may be considered as a product of various risks which may encounter in the performance of the audit. Always remember, an audit risk is always influenced by the inherent risk, control risk, detection risk. Okay, so that's something you need to understand. So next thing is called as a risk-based audit planning, very important. See, when you're working as an auditor, it is not possible for you from the day one you can able to audit all the process. So you get some risk reports of different processes from where you get a visibility. Okay, these processes are very, very critical. So we have to do audit of this process every year. And these processes need to be audited in every 3 years and this audit need to be done in 5 years. This process need to be audited in 5 years. So we have a cycle like that, if you talk about a normal audit principle. So financial audit, it happen every year because the process is highly critical. Data center security audits happen in every 3 years. Okay, so we follow this chain of cycle. So when auditor conduct any audit, the first thing is that auditing any process, he need to do the planning, what process they need to audit. So they do the audit based on the risk assessment. So that's why by understanding the nature of business, IS auditor can identify and categorize the type of risk that will better determine the risk model or an approach in conducting audit. And by prioritizing audit area based on level of risk, they can present to the organization. And the steps is we identify risk, we look for the inherent control detection risk and develop the audit plan focusing on the high risk area. And we have a two type of plan. One is called long term, which is aligned with the strategic goal like 5-year plan and all that. And then we have a short term, like example, we have a 5-year strategy and company has suddenly decided they will move employee to work from home. So there is some major changes happen in the business process. So it is a short-term audits and that will plan accordingly. So role of an auditor here to assess and risk and relocate the resources with the greatest potential impact. Example, like we prioritizing audit for customer data encryption practice due to the risk of the data breach. We focus on the role of inherent risk in the risk-based planning, and we question often test the risk prioritization. So we have a sequence here. The first step is we gather the information plan where we knowledge of business, industry, prior audit results, recent financial information, regulatory status. Then we obtain the understanding of the internal control environment, control risk, detection risk assessment, control risk assessment equations. Then we do the compliance test, absence and presence of control, then substances test, where we do the analytic procedures and all that. I'm going to cover this, okay? This compliance substance we need to cover in the later stage. And then we conclude the audit. So that something is the overall process we have. Now we are moving to the next part, which is called as a risk assessment. So next topic is risk assessment. But before I want to jump into risk assessment, I want to discuss about the high level about risk management. Risk assessment is a part of risk management. That's something you need to understand. Because when you're talking about the risk functions and all, the risk management is a driving factor. When you hire anyone, when you fire anyone, you do risk management, right? So let's understand the high level. So when we're talking about risk management, in the risk management, the first step is called as a risk identification. That's the first step. Okay. And under the risk identification, we have three important things. Identify threats, identify vulnerability, and third, identify assets. Let's say example, in this step, we have a server. We identify threats are like, what is threat? Threat is an action, okay, which triggers. So one of the threat, I'm assuming the server is on DMZ. So threat can be any DOS attack can be occur on DMZ. And what is the chance of this threat to be successful? This DOS attack can shut down my server within 30 minutes and we don't have any backup. Vulnerability is that there is no backup. Vulnerability is that we don't have a load balancer. Vulnerability is that there is no firewall. So vulnerability is there. Okay, so we have a calculation formula, risk equal to likelihood and impact. So in this particular stage, we just get a visibility. We have some assets, we have some threats, and we have some vulnerabilities. Now, second step, in this particular stage, we're going to evaluate that risk. So that is called as risk evaluation. We're going to evaluate the level of impact. Okay, we know there is a risk, but what is the level of risk? So we have a two-way to evaluate. Not evaluation, qualitative risk analysis. Sorry, apologize. So we have a two type of risk analysis. One is called as a qualitative, and one is called as a quantitative. So qualitative is like we map the likelihood, impact, overall value into high, low, medium. Okay, what is a threat? Threat is DOS. What is a vulnerability? Vulnerability, there is no load balancer. What is the chance of this happening? Is high. And what is the impact if it occurs successfully? High. Overall value is high. So we coming with this kind of value, high, low. So if you don't have a time, you're looking for a shortcut, then you can go for qualitative risk assessment. On the other side, quantitative come with the numbers. Okay, likelihood is basically 5. Impact is basically 5. Overall is value is 25. Okay, overall loss of value is $7,000, 8,000. So we bring some numbers in nature. We bring some economics in nature. That is called as a quantitative. The third step is called as a risk evaluation, where we evaluate the level of risk finally. And fourth step, we have an option of risk treatment, where we treat the risk. So we have 4 options. One is called risk acceptance. Okay, where we accept the risk, because I believe for me the opportunity is more than the risk. See, one more important thing, risk is not something which has already occurred. When we say definition, risk is called as a probability. There is a probability of occurring something. There is a probability, or we might fail this exam. If I fail the exam, that is not a risk. That is already an incident. To prevent the incident, we do risk. Like you watching this video to preparing for CISA. Why? If you don't watch this video, you might fail this exam. But if the person already failed the exam, then there's no point of watching this video, right? I'm just giving an example. So it's very important for us to understand to prevent the incident. That's why company invests a lot of money on the risk analysis. Same like in stock market. If I invest, I'm using a word, if I invest my money, this portion of money in this stock, I might lose or I might win. So I have to take some risk. Risk can be reward, risk can be liability. So in this case, I believe, okay, what does happen? I will lose $740. But I'm getting a second attempt free, and if I pass, I'm getting a hike of $7,000 because training cost is very, very expensive. So I'm going to accept the risk. I'm not going to implement the control. So that is called risk acceptance. And remember that it is a business decision. Second is called as risk avoidance. I'm discontinuing the opportunity. I'm discontinuing anything which bring more risk to my company. Example, like I know exam cost is $740, $750, $760. And 1% if I fail, company will not going to sponsor. Neither if I clear the exam, I'm not getting any hike. It's better drop this idea, which bring new risk to my budget. Third is called risk transfer, where I'm transferring the budget to third party, insurance and all that. And finally, we have a mitigation. So we have a different type of thing. So risk identification and risk analysis and risk evaluation is called as a risk assessment, and risk treatment is the next thing. So risk assessment is all about identify, quantify and prioritize the risk to determine the management action and control activity. So the steps in the risk assessment is identify risk and vulnerability, that is done a risk identification. Analyze the potential impact, that comes in a qualitative and quantitative, and prioritize based on a likelihood and impact. And outcome is we recommend the implementation controls and everything. And when you're doing an audit and all that, in that also we do this risk assessment. So it's very important for you to know the risk assessment, because risk assessment help you to prioritize your audit planning. So role of an auditor here is to evaluate whether management risk assessment align with the business goals and regulatory requirement. I'll give an example. Okay, so I'm doing an assessment of change management process. I discovered the change management documentation is missing. So that is basically a vulnerability. What is the threat? If someone doesn't follow, then unauthorized change can be introduced that lead to the impact. So we understood likelihood of this is high. Impact is basically low because it's an operational change. So overall risk is basically medium. So this is how, when we identify findings and all that, on that we do the risk assessment. So what is the role of an auditor is why we use risk assessment, because risk assessment evaluate whether management assessment align with the business goals. An example like CISA or auditor release a risk in a cloud migration project and identify inadequate encryption as a major vulnerability. So from the exam point of view, we have a different type of risk. Risk before implementing control or risk before taking any action, that's called inherent. The control that you're introducing, it is not effective, that's called control risk. Auditor could not able to discover something, that is a detection risk, and that lead to the overall audit risk. So you should know this from the exam point of view. Okay. Now we have a different type of controls. When you're doing an assessment, you find some controls because controls are introduced to reduce the impact. So first control is preventive control, something you introduce to prevent the risk or avoid the risk. So firewall is there, implementing authentication so no one can able to hack. Second is called detective control, where you identify issues like intrusion detection system, identify breaches, audit trails and all that. Then we also have a corrective control. Now corrective control means if any successful incident occur, then further we have to take a corrective action. Like example, we have a DLP here, DLP, data loss prevention, which ensure data should not leave any unauthorized network. And we also have a firewall which monitor all the connection. And then we have web server here. So now there's a lot of attacks happening from outside. Now let's say example, this firewall is down. So we have a second layer of defense here to protect if my primary firewall is down. So that is called as a compensating control. If my first control is failed, we have a compensating control to protect the impact. But in worst case, if they're able to hack the system is infected with the virus, the first thing I will do is I will isolate a system immediately from the network. I don't want a further infection to be done to the other system. That is called corrective action, temporary but effective. I'll give one more example. So government has introduced a circular, no one's supposed to go out. Let's say example, during a COVID time, we had this circular, no one's supposed to go out. So we find some people outside and then they go for the, so preventative control is they maintain a social distance, they're wearing a mask and all that. So when they go to office and all, they're checking the temperature and we identify some people have a COVID symptoms. So detective control is detecting the COVID symptoms. So isolating the person immediately and doing a 14 days treatment, that is part of corrective and recovery. Compensating control is like, you're wearing a mask and maintaining a social distance. So if a mask is not effective, at least because social distance, you can protect yourself from that infection. So key consideration is control must address what should be achieved and what should be avoided, because every control you cannot able to implement, and control which will be applied across the organizational level, but based on a risk assessment. Now here, the role of an auditor is to assess the effectiveness of internal control in achieving the business goals and mitigating risk. And we also evaluating the effectiveness of each control type in addressing risk. So example, like we're reviewing the SOD to prevent the fraud. We implementing compensating control like multi-factor authentication, like password with OTPs and compensatory control. So definitely when you're preparing for CISA, you should be very clear with the control categories. What is preventive, when to use, detective, when to use, correct, when to use. So for information, to prevent the incident, before incident, we have preventive control. During incident, we have a detective. Post incident, anything need to be repaired, we have a corrective control. So when we implementing this control, every control need to have a justification, which come with the control objective and control measure. I'll give an example. So control objective define what need to be achieved. Let's say example, one of my control objective is to ensure the reliability of financial reporting. Reliability of financial reporting. So my purpose is to guarantee accurate, complete, timely financial data that adhere to the IRFS or GAAP requirement. Now, what is the control measure here for that? What I'm implementing to maintain the accuracy. So that is called as a segregation duty. So control objective define what need to be achieved, like protect the organization from external attack, and control measure is implementing a firewall. Now, information system specific control like safeguard the information system, ensure system availability. And what is the role of an auditor here? That's a question. So role of an auditor is to ensure the control is aligned with the organization objectives and contribute to the overall security and reliability. And example like ensuring a disaster recovery plan include measure to maintain system availability. And from the exam point of view, you need to remember is how the control objective linked to the specific control measure and it is effective or not. So role of an auditor is to ensure controls align with the organization objective, then only it is an effective control. So remember from exam point of view, if any question talking about control effectiveness and all that, ideally the good control effectiveness is the one which control align with the overall business objective, organization objective, then only it is an effective control. And I've given an example of the same thing, like, disaster recovery plan. So focus on how the control objectives links to the specific control measure. Now in the previous slide, if you remember, we discussed about type of control, but how you, so these are the type of control, like this is how they work, but how we enforce this, in which form it enforce it. So we have a 3 category, managerial control, technical control, and physical control. So these are the 3 categories. I have a dedicated video. If you go to YouTube and type prep control types, you will get a dedicated video I've covered on that, and highly recommend to check that. Okay. So we have a 3 way to enforce the preventative, corrective, and detective. So one is called managerial, technical, and physical. So managerial control is called as a administrative control. It is also called as a administrative control. Now, when we're talking about administrative control, let's say example, company introduce a circular. Okay, no one's supposed to, so we are resuming work from office. Everyone has to wear a mask. Without mask, we will not allow any employee to enter into the facility. So it's a message which setting a very good direction to prevent any person not to come to the office without mask. So if we have given an instruction to the security guard who's standing in the main gate, make sure no one should come without mask. So when anyone come without mask, he will say it's a management direction that you cannot enter without mask. So that's a managerial control. So we enforce the preventative function in a more administrative way. Technical control, firewall. In firewall, we create a rule. So by this, it's preventive, the things. So antivirus, firewall, it is technical in nature. I'm not involved there. Then physical control, something you install physically to detect, prevent, like hiring a security guard, prevent, installing a CCTV camera, prevent, physical. So that is basically called as a physical, something you install physically. So all three controls should be work together and ensure the secure access to IT resource and data. Ultimate goal of information system control is to secure the access to IT resources. So what is the role of an auditor is to evaluate the control categories and ensure the proper mix of mitigating risk, because control was introduced to mitigate the risk. And as a CISA, we recommend combining a physical lock and biometric access for server room security. This is an example we're talking about. Okay. So physical lock is a physical control, biometric access for server room security is a combination of technical and physical control. So this is how you need to know, it's not, okay, managerial. It means any control which is administrative in nature, like in terms of policies, sending a circular, something was technically defined. Example, when you log into a system, there's a technical function which asks for the password. It is not a human who, okay, every time he will pop up, tell me the password. No, it's a technical function which automatically asks for the password. And the physical control is prevent the unauthorized access. So you should be very clear with the where to implement what type of control. It's very important. Okay. So now the question is, when you implement the control, you have to monitor the controls. So we have to ensure the controls are being followed and remain effective. And for that, we need to introduce a matrix so that we can able to verify. So if we get any question in the exam talking most effective control to verify the effectiveness, audit. What is the best way to demonstrate the effectiveness of the control to the management is metrics. And when auditor doing an audit of the controls and all that, we have to make sure we assess whether control meet the business objective and effectively mitigate the risk. So key consideration is identify the weakness and recommend the improvement. So role of an auditor is to perform the independent evaluation to ensure controls monitoring results are actionable. We conducting a periodic review of access control logs to ensure compliance with policy, and from the exam point of view, focus on the role of control, monitoring and independent evaluation in maintaining effectiveness. So that is something is the ultimate goal we have. Independence is the most important part. So now we are moving to the second part of this domain, which is called as an execution. Okay. Okay. So now it times to execution. Whatever we have covered so far was more about planning. So when it comes to the execution, one thing we need to understand that we have an audit project and we have an audit program. So group of projects equal to the program. Okay. So project has a start and end time. So when we're doing any audit, we have a particular date to start, particular date to finish. So always remember group of project lead to the program. So when you defining and managing a project, audit project, first step is plan the audit engagement, where you define the objectives, allocate resource, like, how many auditor will be involved, who will do the audit, what is the scope, and all that. Then we build the audit plan where we chart the activities, timeline, resource optimizations and all that. We involve the Gantt charts and everything. In my next domain, I will discuss that. Then we execute the plan where we perform the audit, procedures, control testings and all that, field work and all that. And then we monitor the project activity, track the progress, address the challenge and all that. And there's a reason for that. Because we have a billable things, when auditor do the audits and all that, we count the man hours. So normally 187, 188 days of year, we basically bill an auditor. Okay, so we have to monitor how much hours we have allocating for audit, how many hours we are allocating for admin activities. We have to define that. That's why we're monitoring the project activities. Now, what is the role of an auditor here? He evaluates the control strength and weakness, ensure adequate resource and schedule for audit should be there. And we prepare the audit report with actionable recommendations when you preparing the things and all that. So role of an auditor, as I said, oversee the audit progress from planning to execution. And example like planning internal audit functions for the compliance with 27001, identifying high risk controls, focus testings. So remember, from the exam point of view, is that you need to understand the steps of audit project management, and particularly resource allocation, audit monitoring. See, when you're conducting any audit, the primary purpose of any audit objective is to align with the business goal. So any question in the exam talking about primary purpose of audit or audit objective, a good audit objective is one which align with the organization goals. Okay, and second, then we have a compliance with legal, regulatory, and policy, because by complying with the goals, automatically complying with legal, regulatory requirement. If the question frame like what must be followed, then legal requirement must be followed. Now we have two type of objectives. One is called general, which is a broad goal of internal audit, and then we have a specific objective like process for systems and all that. Example, process we auditing, so we have a change management audit objective. It's a process, okay, ERP system, a particular system objective. So when you're defining audit objective, one is general. We as an internal audit and goal is to improve the compliance and all that. That is general objective, which is common for all the audits. And specific is basically when you're doing a audit of a specific process. And the key activities translate the broad audit goals into the actionable objective, and we identify the key control to test the compliance. So role of an auditor is to translate the organization goals into measurable audit objectives. We establishing an objectives to ensure transaction logs are properly maintained and reviewed. And the questions here is to how to define the audit objectives and their relevance to the compliance and risk mitigation. So that's something we have to define. So when you're doing an audit has a phases, we already discussed in the previous. So we have first step is called planning, where we determine the objective, scope, and resource. Then we do the actual audit. So let's say example, I'm doing an audit of change management process. So I will define the scope in the audit plan, which department or which zone of change management we are doing. We're doing a change management audit of India division. Okay, what is the scope? India division is there, resources, how many auditors will be involved. Then we'll collect the documents, review the documents. Then we schedule the meetings to confirm the documents, test the control, look for the logs, and then we prepare the report. The biggest challenge for any auditor is that when you're preparing a reports and all that, convey the auditee, because we need their acknowledgement on the findings. Then only you can present to the board and all that. And they're also accountable and responsible for implementing the controls for the recommendation which we have given. They need to provide the action plan. So like the way that the software developer always having a nightmare, his software should be passed. Same like auditor has a nightmare once the audit report should be passed by the auditee. So we identify the audit subject, which process I'm going to audit. What is the scope? Like audit subject is change management, scope is India. We acquire the data and we draft and issue the audit report. So role of an auditor here is to execute each phase effectively and document things. And during a field phase, conducting interview, system review to identify gaps in data security. That's the example we're talking about. Okay. So from the exam point of view, be familiar with the phases of audit process, which is very important. So next part is called as an audit program. See, any kind of audit you're doing, we need a program. Program is like a set of activities under which we have a project. So audit program is a structured set of steps for conducting an audit and including the tests and evaluation. And the purpose of having audit programs to ensure the consistency, reliability in the audit process, because if we create one standard audit program, so everyone can follow effectively, and it provides the detailed instructions for executing the audit. And the component of the audit program, this is something you need to know, is audit scope and objectives, and they also have a methods for evidence collections and testing. That something is part of a requirement. Now, what is the role of an auditor? Role of a CISA. You need to develop and follow detailed audit program. Okay, always in one thing, when you're creating an audit program, it should be tailored as per the organization need. Might be in my company, might have a different audit program. We have a different way of doing testing. In your organization, you have a different way of doing the testing. So we have taken example here is using an audit program to assess the access control systems, including a user permission authentication. So remember, from the exam point of view, focus on the importance of audit program and primary objective. Remember, primary objective of having a program to ensure the consistency and accuracy in the audit. That something is part of a requirement. Okay, so next topic is called as the audit testing sampling. See, it's a very, very important topic, and you really need to understand how it works, when to use what kind of a testing and what is a sampling method, because without this, the exam will not be completed. So you need to have a very good visibility how it works. No, question is, what is this all about? See, when the auditor do the auditing, so let's say example, I'm doing an audit of chain management process. So you can see a lot of logs, you will get a lot of reports. So it is not possible for me to go one by one each. So we have to do some kind of a perspective, it's not possible. So it's same like in India, we have a population of 100 CR. It is not possible for the Indian government to do the audit of each and every account. So we will take some samples. Let me explain you with the example so you get a better visibility. So what we did is we take some samples from here, samples from here, samples from here. Okay. So here we have a 10,000 people. Here we have a 10,000 people. Here we have a 10,000 people. From the 10,000, I took only 100 samples. And on that, I will see how much issues I'm finding. If I'm finding major issues, I will reject this particular thing. So it means based on that, I can present my opinion. So when we deal with multiple transactions, one of the biggest concern we face is audit risk. Audit risk basically when failed to detect, and then based on that, we might give a wrong opinion. That is why we use the concept of sampling. And this is what you need to understand. Sampling was introduced to reduce your inherent risk, reduce your audit risk and all that. Remember, the primary objective of introducing sampling is to reduce the audit risk. So sampling is actually two types. First, we discuss sampling because you need to have visibility. Sampling is two types: statistical sampling and non-statistical sampling. So statistical sampling is basically use the probability model of selection. Let me explain you. So it is basically used when auditor need a random and representative number to generalize the finding across the entire population. So let's say example, in this case, we selected 100 expenses. We selected 100 expenses claim. We selected 100 expenses claim from 10,000 pool to check if all have a proper approval. Okay, we are going with all the numbers. So that is basically called statistical sampling. Second is called as a non-statistical. So on the other side, non-statistical sampling is used when auditor focus on a specific area based on a judgment. Example, high-risk transactions, where he manually selecting expenses which is claim exceeding 10,000 to verify the control effectiveness for a high-value approval. So that is how we're taking one example here. So like I know, like, okay, I have a pretty much experience in this company from last 10 years. So I know what sample I need to pick. So that is called as a non-statistical sampling. Now, problem is that when you select the sample, how you test that? So we have a two type of testing method. One is called compliance testing and one is called substantive testing. First, we start with compliance testing, which verify the effectiveness of the control. And substantive testing basically verify the substantive testing verify the data accuracy and completeness. Let me explain you with the example. So let's say example, we have a 50 payrolls transaction. So we have 50 payroll transaction. Okay, we select 50 payroll transactions using a statistical sampling. Okay, now we're checking if the transaction has a company management approval or manager approval. I'm just checking absence and presence of control. I'm checking each transaction, does it have a management approval? That's it. Is it clear? If transaction have a valid approval, the control is working effectively. If 5 out of 50 transaction lack approval, the control is flagged as ineffective. So here I'm checking the absence and presence of control. Now with the same example, we are applying the substance testing. So now we select the 30 payroll transactions and we compare the payment amount in the payroll system with employee contract to confirm correct salary amount or bank statement to confirm the actual disbursement. So if all 30 transactions match supporting document, data is accurate. If any kind of discrepancy is found, investigation need to be done. So thin line differences in a compliance testing. In compliance testing, we validate the controls are functioning, example approvals. But in a substantive testing, we verify the data is accurate and complete. Payroll amount is accurate or not. Example, ensuring all payroll transactions are approved. It's a part of control. Ensuring payroll amounts are correct and paid. So compliance testing evaluate the control effectiveness. Substantive testing validate the data accuracy and detect the errors and frauds. So that's something we are taking. Okay. So some sampling risk sometimes we have is incorrect acceptance, like undetected material weakness, or sometimes we have incorrect rejections. Okay, so role of CISA is to understand is that's why, if you can notice that it's mentioned, testing method is what to evaluate, and sampling technique is decide how to select the data for a testing. Okay, so we're using all this technique to reduce the audit risk. So as a role of a CISA is that use appropriate testing method and sampling technique to gather the reliable evidence, and we select the sample of financial transaction to verify the compliance with internal policy. Is it clear? And we able to differentiate between the compliance and substance testing in their application. That's how it basically works. Now, the audit evidence collection technique, it's very important. Okay, so when you're collecting any evidence, two things you need to remember. So evidence must be competent and evidence must be sufficient. I repeat again, evidence must be competent and evidence must be sufficient, because by evidence only you can justify whether control is working or not. Now, when I say competent, it means quality, relevancy, reliability, and sufficiency is basically mean quantify of the audit evidence. So, but apart from that, when you're presenting any kind of an evidence, we also need to check the independence of a evidence provider. Like, okay, I'm providing an evidence of a manager. So might be my evidence can influence my management decisions. Qualification of evidence provider. I'm pretty much experienced in the audits, and that's why I'm able to provide the evidence. Objectivity of the evidence, that is also very important, and timing of the evidence. So these are basically the factors we have that we consider we doing with the evidence. So what is the evidence collection technique? The first technique that we use is direct observation and management interview. Like we actually start with the observation. Auditor always visit and review and everything. Then the result from the independent third party assessment, and sometimes the materials are retrieved from the organization records. So the characteristics of evidence is sufficient enough to support the audit conclusion. It should be reliable, collected from credible source, and more important, it should be relevant, directly aligned with the audit objective. That's why we say the key consideration in this scenario is the independence and timelines and accuracy of the evidence. I'll explain you. See, we're doing an audit this year, 2025. So we need to provide the evidence of 2025. If you're going to provide the evidence of 2022, it doesn't make sense because that year we already complete the audit. So timeline accuracy is very important. So what is the role of an auditor here? So we evaluate the quality and reliability of evidence to draw the objective conclusions. And example like collecting a system access logs to verify the compliance with access control policy. And from the exam point of view, you need to remember is focus on what make the audit evidence sufficient and reliable for compliance validation. Because as an IS auditor, you should focus on overall objectives of the review and not the nature of the evidence. And understand the rule of evidence is important for IS auditor because it may encounter a variety of evidence type. So it's very important. Okay. Okay, so we have a next topic which is called audit data analytics. Actually, this is something has been added in the new syllabus of CISA, which is introduced in last year. And we can expect some questions from this area definitely when you're preparing for the certification. Now, what is data analytics? Let's first understand. See, as an auditor, we deal with a lot of data. Manually, it is not possible for me to investigate each and every data for audit. So we use a data analytic tool. What is data analytic? You go to ChatGPT, you enter some prompt, you get a precise data. Same like what happened is we have some chunk of data. We upload the data in some data analytic tools. That tool will analyze the data and provide me some kind of information. Like example, I uploaded the last 5-year transactions in one application. So the application analyze the data and then provide me a very good information. Like, okay, in the month of January, this much amount of business happened from this particular source. From this particular month, we got this kind of source. So that information is a great insight for me. And based on that, I can do my planning. So in data, so this is called data analytics, but first step in the data analytics is data mining, data collection. So data analytics in audit is very important because we are dealing with a lot of logs and all that. So we have to use some kind of a tool to analyze those logs and provide me a set of information. So data analytics is used to analyze the large data sets to uncover the trends and anomalies, and it supports the risk-based audit planning. So with the help of data analytics, we can able to identify unauthorized system access patterns, cross-reference HR, IT logs for anomalies and all that. What is anomalies? Anomalies is abnormal patterns. And you might get the things is what is the primary benefit of data analytics or audit data analytics. So we can able to increase the accuracy and efficiency by using the data analytics. We can able to improve our accuracy and efficiency. And more important, we can able to improve the identification of risk and inefficiencies. That's something we can consider. So as a role of CISA or role of auditor is to leverage the data analytics to enhance the audit quality and reduce the manual effort. So here we have taken one example is like we analyzing the financial transaction for duplicate or suspicious activity. Now, as a human, it is not possible for me to do the audit of each and every transactions. So I will collect the bunch of data, do the analysis of pattern and identify some abnormal pattern from the transactions. So remember, from the exam point of view, be familiar with data analytics tools and application in audit and what is the purpose of the data analytics in the audit perspective. And as you know, we have a trend of now AI ML. So you can expect some questions around this particular area. So in my previous section, we have discussed about this one, audit data analytics, right? Now question is, okay, we have to audit, but how? So we use a lot of softwares. So one of the softwares technique we called as a CAT, computer assisted audit technique. So it referred to the automated tool and technique, which is used by auditor to analyze a large volume of data, and by which we can able to detect all the anomalies and improve the efficiency and accuracy of the audit. And it can be a tool used for examining the financial records. Okay, we can use for system logs, we can use for transactions, and we can use for control effectiveness by using a software of the manual process. So one thing is that we have some key functions in the, let's say example, today I want to investigate window logs. So I don't have expertise to investigate file by file. So with the help of CAT tool, the tool will scan the applications, it analyzes the logs and provide me the set of informations. So that something is there. So I will explain you how CAT works. Let's say example, I'm an auditor. I want to match payroll data. Okay, I want to match payroll data. Okay, against the HR records. Okay, so I will use a CAT software. So system. So we have a system here. So it basically flag all the employee. So it flag employee receiving payment without matching a HR record. So all the records coming, they will verify which payments are coming without matching a HR record. So by this way, investigations reveal the fake employee who created by the insider for payroll frauds. So here, auditor is reviewing the payroll transaction to identify the ghost employee, like fraudulent employee on the payroll. So auditor match the payroll data against the HR record using a CAT software. So system will flag all employees who are receiving a payment without matching a HR record. So investigation can reveal how many fake employees we have, which is created by insider, or you can say insider for a payroll fraud. So this is how we can use this particular process. So we have a lot of tools available for CAT, like we have one of the popular is ACL, Audit Command Language. Then we have IDEA, Interactive Data Extraction Analysis. Then we have a Power BI, we are using Tableau, we are using SAP GRC. So these are the popular tools we have. Now, when we're talking about CAT, so one of the first function of the CAT is called data analysis. Okay, so we identify the patterns, we look for the trends, we look for the anomalies and operational data. The second is called as a automation testing. So it checks the compliance with the policies, procedure and control. Third is called as a fraud detection. We can able to flag the suspicious activities like duplicate payments, unauthorized access or unusual transactions. And it can also help you with sampling. It can also help you with sampling. You know, you can help to in selecting the representative samples for testing actually. And with the help of CAT, we can do the continuous auditing. So we have a different type of CAT actually. So one is basically called as a GAS here, Generalized Audit Software. So it basically used to analyze a financial transaction for duplicate invoice. Okay, then we are using data matching where we comparing the employee records, payroll records with HR database. We have a regression analysis where we predict the financial fraud based on a past transactions. So we have a different type of CATs. So ultimate benefit of having a CAT is increase the accuracy, reduce the error, efficiency. Biggest reason of using CAT is increase the efficiencies, and it can be better in detecting a frauds. And from the exam point of view, remember CAT automate the audit process and reducing the manual effort. The biggest reason of going for the CAT is automate the audit process and reduce the manual effort. And they are used for fraud detection, data analysis, and continuous auditing. So, and if you want to incorporate CAT, we can able to incorporate CAT to monitor the controls and application in real time. So by using a CAT, we can able to efficiently analyze the evidence, which can improve the audit coverage. That's why we are using the example is GAS, which is called Generalized Audit Software, to identify the duplicate invoice, and by using a CAT to identify duplicate invoice across the multiple systems. So you should know the type of CAAT. Example like gas is there, which is popularly testable. And you should also know what is the benefit, primary benefit. So increase efficiency and automate the effort. So by using this, we can act like a tool, and by which we can able to do the audits. Now, next is called as artificial intelligence in auditing. Very, very important. And it is part of a new syllabus of CISA. Now, when we're talking about AI, artificial intelligence, okay, it's a very important thing. And as you know, we have a two important element here, AI and ML. Okay, so we have a brain, we have our own intelligence who think, and based on that, he gives a response. Same like AI is a brain, use a machine learning to provide the data. So now what happened? See, I am an auditor. You need to understand one thing, auditor get paid for his thought process. And based on his thought process only, he asks the question. But now we are introducing AI also in the audit. So AI will prepare the question, generate the question, analyze the pattern, and identify the findings. So AI use one of the most important technique is called predictive analytics. Now, what is predictive analytics? Before I jump into in detail, let's first understand predictive analytics. What is that? So it's a process of using a historical data, statistical algorithm, machine learning technique to forecast the future outcome. And it helps the organization to anticipate the events before they happen. Is it clear? And how it works is, first they collect the past data, then they remove all the inconsistencies and organize the data for analysis. Then they apply some algorithm, machine learning to detect the trends, and then system will make a prediction what will be the future. And this is how it can be used for decision-making process. So like in a sales, we collected the last 5-year data, in which month we do the admission high and all that. Then we analyze the pattern. Then based on that, we can prepare, okay, this year in the month of January, we have to launch some offers because in the March, we have a good business. So this is a technique which is called as a predictive analysis. Okay. So predictive analytics for fraud detection is also use of a historical data. Same process we follow. Let's say example, there is a bank. Okay. Let's say example, there is a bank. So there is a bank. So bank is basically using a predictive analytics to monitor the customer transactions. Okay. So system will analyze the spending habit based on the location, frequency, and amount. If sudden high value transaction occur in a foreign country, which is deviation from unusual pattern, the system flag as a potential fraud. You understood? So I think it's a common thing when you use credit cards and all that, sometimes you automatically receive a calls. So nowadays we are using AI in like that. So transaction either block automatically or require the manual verification. So this is how we are using AI in the audit. So we can able to, so the biggest reason of using AI is automate your standard task. I know this is step 1, this is step 2, this is step 3. So it can be automated. So with the help of AI, we can do that. But the biggest concern is transparency and accountability, because there's no proper transparency, how they're collecting the information, how they're analyzing the information. And someone has to take the accountability, right? So that something is there. Second is whatever they audit, whatever the activity they're doing, we need to validate whether it's true or not, because sometimes AI can, even ChatGPT give a wrong answer, right? So that's there. So the best practice is combine the AI tool with the human expertise. Data will be collected by the AI tools. Okay. And then we can validate the data just to make sure we are in the same page. So like we are using the AI to assess the risk and benefit of tools. So example is we're using AI to analyze the vendor payment data for irregularities. Let's say example, we got a task to audit the vendor. So we'll see the past data, how many time vendor has delayed the payment. So we collect the data based on predictive analytics, and we can able to analyze, okay, it might be in the future, he will do the same mistakes. Understood? So that's how it basically works. So remember, from the exam point of view, we need to understand how AI improve the audit efficiencies and limitations. One more important thing, we are using the AI today in a continuous auditing process also. There's a concept called as a continuous auditing process, where we evaluate the process control in real time. Okay. Like system transaction, flag transaction, financial transaction, and continuously get audited, right? But today now we are using the AI in that. So we embed the control for real time, and we automate the alert for compliance violation. So we're doing some payments. If the transactions is going beyond the approvals and all that, it automatically send a message to the customer, and that will be considered as a flag transaction. So we have embedded a control in the transactions. So advantage of doing continuous auditing instead of having a one-time process. Let's say example, today is the date of doing an audit, and we're doing after 1 year. So now if I do the audit, I definitely find some issues, right? Like last 1 year issue. So instead of having some kind of a surprises, we do on a real time. That's why, financial transactions use continuous auditing. Any payment get approved after 1 lakh, $1,000, it should be flagged as a transaction so we can able to audit. So advantage is that immediate identification of risk and improve the agility. But today in the new syllabus of CISA, they introduce AI in the audit. So by this, we can able to automate the repetitive tasks like data entry, pattern detection, and we can able to enhance the decision making with the predictive analytics. Predictive analytics mean we are using old data, but challenge again the transparency and reliability. So we have to assess the effectiveness of continuous auditing using AI to detect the fraudulent activity in the financial transactions. So that's an example we have. So we have to focus on the role of AI in automation audit tasks, and you also need to know the limitations. See, once you're done with the audit, the next thing is called as a report the audit's results and everything. So the one important document that you prepare is called as an audit report. See, as like a software developer, his biggest concern is the application to be passed by the quality team. Same like for an auditor, the biggest concern is basically his report will be approved by the auditee, because auditee has to give a consent with his recommendations. So your report should include a summary of finding. It should be combination of positive and negative. It should not be completely negative. It should not be completely positive. It should be balanced. Okay. So if you're talking about some issues like, okay, change management process, documentation is missing, ineffectiveness, but one thing is good happening is proper separation duty, managers reviewing the things. So when you're preparing such kind of a report, you're giving a balanced approach of both positive, negative. As an auditor, your responsibility is to give the recommendation of the corrective action also. That is a very important part. So this is the report in which we talk about the risk. We talk about the recommendation, which include the corrective action, and action plan will be filled by the auditee. So the objective of providing a report to clearly communicate the result and provide the actionable insight. And in the exam, there will be question might be that what should be the ideal content of the report. It should include the summary, methodology, findings, and recommendation. That's something you need to understand. Along with that, you need to also understand that what is the role of an auditor. So role of auditor is to ensure the audit reports are clear, concise, and should be aligned with the organization goal. Example, like preparing a report that highlight the non-compliance. So make sure from exam point of view, you need to be prepared to outline the key component of an effective audit report. And you also responsible for doing a follow-up of the findings that you identify. Now in this entire reports, you basically get a lot of documentations, because to support any evidence, support any findings and all that, you need to provide the documentation. So it serves as a basis for audit conclusion, and it demonstrates the adherence to the audit standard and objective. So content of the audit documentation is audit objective, scope, record of audit evidence, recommendation follow-up. And this is something you keep after even audit is over, like in a year, how many audit you did. So this documentation reflects your governance process. But when you're preparing this documentation, it must be accurate. Whatever the document you prepare, it must be accurate, because your activity also get audited by the other department. So it must be accurate, should be complete, it should be accessible. And it should be retained as per the retention policy. And this is where the question can be catch, Post audit, how long we need to retain the documentation? It should be retained as per the retention policy. So what is the role of an auditor? To ensure the audit documents is comprehensive and support the audit findings. Let's say example, preparing a detailed log of finding during an IT system audit for regulatory compliance. So make sure you understand the importance of audit documentation in supporting the audit results and compliance with the function. Now, as I said, type of audit reports we have. One is which talk about the audit outcome, and it serves as a formal record for compliance. So we have a 3 type of audit reports. One is basically called as a general audit report, very high level internal use. Second is report, which can be tailored as per the regulatory compliance or specific stakeholder. And sometimes we initiate some temporary audits like fraud investigations and all that. For that, we have one special category of audit report. So a good report is the one should be clear. Actionable recommendation should be there. Realistic recommendations, okay, and logical flow summaries and follow-up action. After the audit is over, auditee has accepted, you have to do follow-up on the defined date on which they have given the action plan. Like example, on this particular date, we will implement this. Okay, so you have to do the follow-up on that day. So what is the role of an auditor here is tailor the report to meet the need and create a report as per the audience, and be familiar with the report objectives. That something is very important. See, another important thing is called as a follow-up activity. As I said, once the audit has been done, You have to verify, have they implemented the corrective actions? So if the auditee say, we have implemented a firewall, ask for the evidence, ask for the logs. It's very important. Ensure the issues has been identified in the audit are resolved. And the steps that we follow is communicate the finding to the management. We monitor the progress and update the documentation. So key consideration here is continuous monitoring and follow-up results. So by this, we can able to track the implementation of the recommendation of reassess the risk. And by doing a follow-up, like, let's say example here, we're doing a follow-up of the implementation of encryption control, which is recommended in the data security audit. So we have to see whether they have implemented or not. So follow-up is very important. See, in the entire audit process, quality assurance is very important actually. So quality process is very important. So we have to make sure overall all the audit activities, whatever is happening, it should be compliance with the quality standards. So we need to improve the quality audit process to ensure it meet the regulatory other standards. And so key component here is we appoint the audit committee, which oversight the audit plans, performance and everything. We also have audit quality assurance, which monitor the compliance with audit objectives. And if any kind of a training need to be provided to the auditors to upskill them. So we have a dedicated training and development program. So they are the one who actually audit the other auditors just to make sure they're in the same page. So role of an auditor here to promote the continuous improvement. That's something they should be look for, and implement the formal review. And remember, from the exam point of view, audit quality assurance is basically has a role to, you can say, improve the audit performance. That something is basically there. Is it clear? So that something is very, very important. And in the quality assurance and all, the documentation is very important. Okay, documentation is very important. So documentation provide the record to justify the audit conclusion. It acts as an evidence. And the component of documentation is audit objectives, scope, timeline, documentation procedures, evidence. And these documents basically provide a clear audit trail. So we can able to track what has happened, how this happened. We will use this evidence for the investigation. So best practice, as you discussed previously, it should be clear, it should be concise, and we should retain as per the legal or regulatory or retain as per the retention policy. But maintaining a document integrity is the most important part. In this entire process, evidence is play a very important role. So we have a 3 type of evidence: physical evidence like observation, inspection, like auditor when he go on the floor, he observe everything. What he collected on an email, like documentation, like record, contract, procedures. Then using analytics like metrics, dashboard, he can also provide to the board. Independence is very important when he presenting the evidence, and consistency, accuracy is the most important part. So best practice to collect the evidence, use a diverse method like interview, observations, and we validate the sufficiency and everything. So what is the role of an auditor here is assess the evidence collection method, achieve the audit objective like using an access logs to identify unusual login patterns, and compliance validation. And from the exam point of view, remember that characteristics of the reliable sufficient audit evidence is very important. How they impact the audit conclusion, that matters. So this is all from my side from Domain 1. Trust me, this is the first kind of a video anyone has made on YouTube, which talk about end-to-end content structure of CISA Domain 1. And I need a suggestion and comments in the video to let me know, shall I go ahead and make the video on the Domain 2? It will take time, but everything good things take time. So I want to make sure I will take my own quality works and times to present the good things. So I need your suggestion in the comment box, and I want you to subscribe to the channel if you think it's worth it. And this is all from my side. My 70% of the life spending I'm on my content to make sure my gladiators, you are my gladiators, get up-to-date information. Do subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to make sure you should not miss the future videos on a similar topic. Good day. Bye.